My parents funded my brother's failures and called me realistic. Years later, they knocked on my door desperate. Hi, I'm Noah, 20. And the first time I realized my future didn't belong to me was the night my parents handed it to my brother like it was already his. I didn't have much back then, an ancient Dell laptop that sounded like it was trying to lift off, a pair of used over-ear headphones that only worked if you held the cord at a very specific angle, and a brain that refused to shut up about code. The kind of brain that sees a broken website and thinks, I could fix that in a weekend, even if you're broke, tired, and eating cereal with a fork because you can't find clean spoons. I'd been obsessed since I was a kid. At 13, I learned Python off free videos and forums because my school's computer class was basically learning how to center text in Word like it was a superpower. At 15, I'd built a dumb little browser game where you dodge falling wrenches, because my dad, Ray, was a mechanic and I thought it was hilarious. At 17, I made my mom a simple budgeting app after she complained about money disappearing, even though the real culprit was her buying decorative candles like they were groceries. I wasn't doing it for applause. I wasn't even doing it for money at first. I was doing it because when I made something work, it felt like control. Like I could take chaos and force it into a clean, logical system. My parents never understood that. My dad believed in real work. The kind that makes your shoulders ache and your hands cracked. My mom, Susan, came from the kind of family that thought computers were either a scam or a phase, depending on the day. She'd say things like, "You need something you can fall back on," while struggling to attach a PDF. She once printed a screenshot of an email because she didn't trust the internet version. Still, I thought college would be the moment they finally saw me. When my acceptance letters came, 2 state schools, both solid programs, I walked into the kitchen holding them like proof of life. I had this stupid grin on my face, the hopeful kind that feels embarrassing in retrospect. My mom barely looked up from her phone. "That's nice," she said. "But have you considered staying local?" My dad squinted at the letter like it might start smoking. "Do they teach anything useful there? Like wiring? Plumbing?" I tried to laugh it off. I told myself they were just nervous about money. We didn't have much. I got that. I wasn't expecting a fairy tale. So a couple weeks later, I sat down with them at the table to talk details. I'd already been offered a scholarship, small, but real. I had a plan, campus job, cheap housing, ramen grind. All I needed was them to co-sign a modest loan so I could cover the gap. That's when my mom gave me a look I'll never forget. Head tilted. Lips tight. Voice soft like she was about to tell me the dog ran away. "Be realistic, Noah," she said. "Your brother needs that money more than you." I actually laughed at first. Like a reflex. Like surely I'd misunderstood the sentence. "My brother? Caleb?" I asked. Caleb was 25. He'd dropped out of 2 programs already. First, business, then, hospitality management, which sounded impressive until you realized it meant he got bored and quit. He floated between big ideas that lasted a month. One week he was flipping sneakers. Next week he was investing in crypto. Then he wanted to start an online course on high-value mindset, despite having the mindset of a damp napkin. My parents called it finding himself. I called it what it was, being funded. "So let me get this straight," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "You're giving him the college money, even though he's not in school." My dad shrugged like I'd asked whether it might rain. "He's your older brother. He's going through it." My mom nodded. "And you're smart. You'll figure it out." And that, right there, was the knife. Not the money. The assumption. That my ambition was optional. That my future was flexible. That I was the one who could be cut because I'd learned to live without it. I looked at them, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for someone to say, Okay, we're kidding." Nobody did. That night I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, doing the kind of math that isn't numbers. The kind that recalculates your place in your own family. I wasn't a son with goals. I was a backup plan. The dependable one. The quiet one. The one they didn't have to invest in because I'd figure it out. The next morning I packed. My mom cried like she was losing me to a war she didn't start. My dad tried to hand me $80 and said, "You'll be back when the real world hits." I didn't take the money. I withdrew $260 from my cafe job savings, shoved my wheezing laptop into my backpack, and caught a bus 90 minutes away to crash in the back room of a friend's auto shop. It smelled like oil and old pizza and burned rubber. But it was freedom. And for the first time in my life, the silence from my family didn't feel like peace. It felt like the beginning of something. The back room of Connor's auto shop wasn't meant for living. It was meant for broken parts, old tires, and the kind of chairs you sit on for 5 minutes before your spine starts filing a complaint. But Connor threw a blanket on a narrow cot, cleared one shelf for my stuff, and said, "Stay as long as you need. Just don't die back there." That first week, I learned what hunger actually feels like when you're trying to act tough about it. I'd wake up before the shop opened, wash my face in a tiny bathroom sink, and sit on the cot with my laptop on my knees like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The screen flickered whenever I adjusted the angle. The fan wheezed. Sometimes the cursor would lag like it was thinking, "I'm tired too, man." During the day, I worked at a computer repair kiosk inside a big box store. Not the clean, sleek tech world I'd imagined. This was cracked iPads, viruses from suspicious websites, and people who swore they did nothing right before you found 16 toolbars installed on their browser. I made $11.50 an hour, and half of it went to essentials. The other half went to the only thing I cared about, staying online. Because at night, after the shop closed and the lights went out, I'd go back into that back room, put on my headphones, and teach myself the stuff college was supposed to teach me. I learned front-end first, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, because it was immediate. You write something, you refresh the page, and it changes. It felt like proof that effort meant something. Then I worked through React. Then Node. Then basic databases. Then APIs. I built little projects like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. A portfolio site. A small habit tracker. A simple job board scraper. Nothing fancy, just enough to show I could build, that I could learn fast, that I didn't need anyone's permission. And through all of it, my family stayed silent. No. How are you? No. Are you safe? No. Do you need anything? Nothing. Sometimes that hurt so bad it made my stomach twist, but I used it like fuel. I told myself, fine. If I'm invisible, I'll become undeniable. The only person who checked in was my aunt, my mom's sister, and Renee. She'd text once every couple weeks. "You eating? You got a jacket? You need money?" I always said no. Not because I didn't need it. Because I couldn't stand the idea of anyone being able to say I only survived because they rescued me. Meanwhile, I'd hear about Caleb through Renee like a weather report. "He's working on a new venture. He's got a partner this time. He's really serious." 1 month it was a marketing agency. Next it was AI dropshipping automation. Then it was sports betting analytics. Every time it collapsed, my parents called it experience. When I failed, they called it reality. By month 3, I got my first freelance gig. A local dog groomer wanted a website. Simple. Cheap. I built it in a weekend for $180 and felt like I'd been handed a trophy. Then another one, a small landscaping company. $250. Then a weird one, a guy selling custom fishing lures who insisted the site needed flames in the header. I hated it. I did it anyway. $300. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a ladder. And I was climbing it with bleeding hands. Around month 6, Connor came into the back room late one night while I was coding. He watched over my shoulder for a minute, quiet, then said, You always look like you're trying to outrun something. I didn't answer. Because I was. A year passed. Then 2. By the time I was 23, I had a steady remote role, junior developer at a small logistics company. Not Silicon Valley. Not flashy. But it paid more than I'd ever seen, and I moved out of the back room into a tiny apartment with a real bed. I bought a refurbished monitor off Marketplace. Set it up on a foldable table like it was a command center. I stared at it for an hour the first night, just breathing. I thought that would be the moment my family came around. I thought they'd hear about it and finally say something. They didn't. And then, almost 4 years after I left, that silence broke. Not with love. Not with regret. With a knock on my door. And when I opened it, my parents were standing there holding a plastic container of homemade casserole like it was a peace offering. And behind them, hands in his pockets, eyes low, was Caleb. I knew instantly. Nobody drives 2 hours with casserole just to catch up. They were here because something had gone wrong. And whatever it was big. I didn't hug them. That was the first thing my mom noticed. She stepped forward automatically, arms half raised, then stopped when I didn't move. The smile on her face froze in place like she'd forgotten a line in a play. "Oh," she said. "You've changed." "I grew up," I replied, and stepped aside so they could come in. My apartment wasn't fancy. 1 bedroom. Clean. Quiet. 2 monitors on a real desk instead of a folding table. A whiteboard on the wall with half-erased diagrams. No trophies, no photos, no family pictures. Just proof that someone lived there with intention. My dad nodded like he was inspecting a rental. "Looks solid," he muttered. Caleb didn't say anything. He hovered near the doorway, shoulders slouched, eyes fixed on the floor like a kid waiting for a verdict. The golden child look didn't suit him anymore. He looked tired. Worn. Smaller than I remembered. I offered water. Nothing else. We sat. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable, which was new. Growing up, silence was something I endured alone. Now it belonged to all of us. Finally, my mom spoke. "You've done really well for yourself, Noah." There it was. The compliment that felt less like pride and more like an assessment. My dad cleared his throat. "So, you're in tech now?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at them. These 2 people who once told me to be realistic. Who told me my future could wait. "Yes," I said. "I am." Another pause. Then my dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He used the voice he used when I was a kid and left the lights on in the garage. "We're in a bit of a bind." Of course they were. My mom reached for the container and set it on the table between us like evidence. "Caleb's been under a lot of pressure." Caleb shifted. Still didn't look at me. "There was a business deal," my dad continued. "Some investors. Things didn't go the way we expected." "How much?" I asked. They exchanged a look. My mom exhaled slowly. "About $85,000. The number landed in the room like a dropped plate. I waited. "And," she added quickly, "there are some legal complications. But nothing serious. It's just temporary." I looked at Caleb. "You want to explain?" He shrugged, eyes still down. "It got complicated." I laughed. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just a short breath of disbelief that escaped before I could stop it. "You came here," I said slowly, "after 4 years of silence, to ask me for money." My mom's face tightened. "We came because you're doing well. And because you're family." That word again. Family. I stood up and walked to the window. Looked out at the parking lot, the cracked asphalt, the quiet life I'd built from nothing. When I turned back, Caleb finally looked at me. And that's when he said it. "I mean," he muttered, "it's not like you had it that hard. You didn't have all that pressure. You just left and did your own thing." The room went very still. "You're saying..." I replied carefully. That you had it harder than me. He shrugged again, but this time there was something sharp behind it. Defensive. Bitter. Mom and Dad always expected me to succeed. That messes with you. You didn't have anyone breathing down your neck. I stared at him. Then I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. You're right, I said. No one was breathing down my neck. I took a step closer. I was sleeping behind an auto shop. I was working minimum wage fixing other people's broken tech while teaching myself how to build things you pretended to understand. I was eating noodles out of a cup while you were finding yourself with their money. My mom clicked her tongue. Noah, you don't need to be cruel. Cruel? I turned to her. You gave my college fund to him. That was different. No. I cut in. That was everything. My dad stood up, voice firm. Enough. We didn't come here to argue. We came for help. I looked at all three of them. And in that moment, it finally clicked. They didn't see me. They never had. I wasn't their son. I was their contingency plan. I walked to the door and opened it. You need to leave. My mom's eyes filled with tears instantly, like she'd been practicing. Noah. Now. My dad muttered something under his breath about ungrateful kids. Caleb just stood there, stunned, like the world had finally said no to him, and he didn't have the language for it. They left. The door clicked shut. The casserole sat untouched on my table. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, hands shaking, not from fear, but from something breaking loose. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. 2 days later, my phone started blowing up. Aunt Renee called first. You need to hear this from me, she said. Your parents are telling everyone you abandoned them. That you refused to help Caleb when he was desperate. My stomach dropped. They're saying you're greedy, she continued. That you're rich now and turned your back on family. That's when I knew. They weren't done asking. They were done pretending. And the next move they made forced me to stop being patient. By the end of the week, I wasn't just the bad son. I was the villain. Messages started coming in from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. People who never asked how I survived suddenly had opinions about my morals. About family. About money changing people. Then a letter arrived. A real one. From a lawyer. My parents were threatening legal action for emotional distress. They claimed my refusal to help Caleb had caused severe harm to the family. It was ridiculous. And it hurt more than I expected. I hired a lawyer. He skimmed the letter and said, They don't have a case. But they're trying to scare you. For 2 days I shut down. Didn't code. Didn't answer calls. Just replayed everything in my head, wondering if maybe I really was the problem. Then a message came from Evan, an old dev friend. Don't let them rewrite your story. That was enough. I stopped defending myself. And started building something bigger. I went back to an old idea I'd shelved years earlier. A platform for freelancers who didn't come from money. No fake hustle. No cloud games. Just protection, fair pay, and real community. I called it Forge. I reached out to people I trusted, developers and designers who'd also been overlooked, underestimated, or discarded. Every one of them said yes. We worked quietly. No hype. No announcements. At the same time, I started writing. Not names. Not drama. Just the truth. The garage. The silence. The knock on the door years later. I didn't know yet what I'd do with it. I just knew I wouldn't let them control the narrative again. Forge launched without warning. One post in a developer forum. Built by people who were never the first choice. That was it. Within days, thousands signed up. Messages poured in from people sleeping in cars, coding at night, being told they were unrealistic or disposable. People who saw themselves in the story even though I hadn't shared it publicly. For the first time, I felt seen, not by family, but by people who mattered. Then my cousin emailed. Your parents saw what you're doing. They want to talk. I didn't respond. Not yet. A week later, I learned the truth. Caleb wasn't just in debt. He'd lied to investors. Used my parents' house as collateral without telling them everything. Now the bank was circling. That's why they'd come to my door. That's why they wanted family. They didn't miss me. They needed me. So I agreed to meet them. Public place, neutral ground. Dinner was polite. Fake. Heavy. Caleb apologized. My parents asked for help. I said no. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just clearly. A week later, I finally learned the full truth. Caleb wasn't just having a rough time. He wasn't unlucky. He wasn't misunderstood. He had lied. He'd pitched an idea to investors using inflated numbers, half-truths, and promises he couldn't back up. When it started collapsing, he didn't come clean. Instead, he doubled down. Took out a private loan. Used my parents' house as collateral, without explaining the risk. They didn't know how bad it was until it was already too late. That's when everything clicked. The sudden visit. The casserole. The talk about family. They hadn't come because they missed me. They came because they were running out of time. A few days later, my cousin reached out again. Said my parents wanted to meet. Said Caleb was ready to apologize. I agreed, but only under my terms. Public place. Neutral ground. No ambush. We met at a small Italian restaurant halfway between our towns. They were already there when I arrived. My mom stood to hug me. I didn't stop her, but I didn't lean in either. My dad talked about traffic. Caleb stared at his glass like it might save him. Halfway through the meal, Caleb finally spoke. I messed up, he said. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. I waited. My parents filled the silence with excuses. Stress. Pressure. Bad advice. Then came the ask. Not directly. Never directly. My mom reached across the table. If you helped just a little, we could stabilize things. Buy time. I looked at them, really looked. At the people who once told me my future could wait. Who assumed I'd always land on my feet because they didn't bother catching me. I can't, I said. The words sat there, heavy and final. Caleb's face hardened. So that's it? You're just going to let everything fall apart? No, I replied. I'm just not going to hold it together for you anymore. We finished the meal in silence. No hugs. No resolution. Just the quiet understanding that something permanent had shifted. The fallout didn't take long. Investigation started. Investors demanded answers. The loan tied to my parents' house was called in. They tried to reach me, calls, voicemails, messages that swung between anger and pleading. I didn't respond. Not out of revenge. Out of clarity. For the first time, I wasn't responsible for fixing the damage someone else caused. Forge kept growing. The team expanded. People shared their stories inside the platform. Developers who'd been overlooked, burned, discarded, and still built something meaningful. I started mentoring younger devs. The kind who reminded me of myself at 19. Hungry. Quiet. Underrated. I told them the truth. That talent isn't enough if you're constantly being used. That family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to keep others comfortable. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away without burning everything down. I don't hate my parents. I don't even hate Caleb. But I no longer carry them. I built a life that doesn't depend on approval, guilt, or obligation. A life where my value isn't measured by how useful I am to someone else's mistakes. I was never the backup plan. I was just the one they underestimated. And when they finally realized what they'd lost, it was already too late, because by then, I had built something they could never take from me.